All right, so now we've had our print statements, we've been able to debug things, we used the debugger and everything. So again, you just press that debugger, press the green button, and you can debug it using the built-in debugger. Now let's talk about actual HTML, because right now, Hello World doesn't really look like HTML, right? So let's actually make this into real HTML. So the easiest way that we make it into real HTML is to just surround it with our tags. So in this class, we're not going to be talking about HTML syntax or anything like that. We're mostly just going to be assuming that you can look up things in HTML that you don't understand. And if you're confused about it, there's documentation in the syllabus and stuff. But assuming you know that HTML, like H1, gives you the biggest header, you should see a difference here between what we had before, which was just plain text Times New Roman, and header 1. So if we open this up in our browser, so I just clicked this little button here. I just clicked that little button here to open it up in the browser, pop up and pop out into new window. And then if you go in here and you right click and you view the page source, then you should see H1 Hello World, which is awesome. Like that's exactly what we wrote, and that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing a header with that stuff. Now let's think about something more complicated. Let's go to google.com, and while Google looks very simple, if you view the page source, you're going to see a ridiculous amount of stuff. Like you're going to see so many things that I don't know what they do or anything like that. But the point is, let's say that we have this HTML tag out here. If we just copied and pasted it here, then it's going to look really weird, right? Like this is super unreadable and it's obviously not scalable. Firstly, we have like dynamic things that we probably want to add in there. And then we don't want to just have this like crazy unformatted line of code here. So how do we actually make something read from an HTML file instead of just having a string for it? That's going to be what we talk about next. And the way that we do that is by using Jinja2 to render different templates. So here, the only thing that we're going to change is we're going to, instead of passing in a string, we're going to call this function. And it's a built-in Flask function. It's called render template. And all it's going to do is make sure that that it reads from appropriate templates. So I'm just assuming it's called index.html for now. Oh, my video stopped working. Let me get that fired up again. Sorry about that. Okay. So now I'm just assuming that it says index.html because that's like the main HTML page that you normally want to go with. And it corresponds with the name of our method here as well. So we have index.html here, and what we're going to do with it here is basically we want to make sure that we have that file. So really quickly, I'm just going to reset it to where it was before. So if you do an ls from our scratch directory, you should see lect4.py and nothing else. So what we want to do next is actually make a directory called templates. So whenever you call render template, it's going to, I don't know what just happened there. Oh, okay. It's going to look in your templates. It's going to look in your templates directory basically. So what we're going to do, sorry, we don't have to worry about that yet. What we're going to do is make cd, so that's going to make the directory and then cd into it. So we're going to make that templates directory. And then inside of that, we want to make index.html. So again, that's the same as this file name right here. And then we're going to open it up in our C9 terminal, in our C9 text editor. And we have index.html here. Great. So now if we just do something like hello world here, it should look exactly the same as what we currently have. So let's just go ahead and actually try that and make sure that's true. Great, looks exactly the same, and that's exactly what we'd expect. But now we can make things a little bit more complicated and see what happens here. So let's say that we do something like this. Let's take this and copy this a few times, and then let's make it look like this for now. And let's change templates to, or change words to hello templates, because now we're using templates. Awesome. So now let's restart this. And then let's run it. Oh, something weird is happening. I guess it's still loading here. Let's see if I rerun it. Hopefully that works. There we go. All right, cool. Now it says hello templates everywhere. So that is our first intro into using templates. This is a template that we used basically. We're rendering an HTML template, and that's a separate file instead of just like a string interpolated thing that we're directly putting into our Python file, because we don't want to write HTML in a string, because then it's harder to debug things, etc. So it's much easier to just have a template file. So that is exactly what we've done here. So now that we actually have a template here, we should be able to open up our browser, and we should be able to look at the actual HTML that was rendered inline. So let me close all of these tabs. And if we actually right click here and then we look at the actual HTML by looking at view page source, we should see H1, H2, H3, etc. But now let's take a look at this and do an inspect element. This is very interesting, right? So we see HTML, we see a head tag, we see bodies, we see some divs, and we see like the closing HTML tag. So that's very different than what we saw in the source. We didn't provide like the HTML and the head and everything. So that's one of the beautiful things about Flask and Jinja2. Jinja2 is actually going to automatically fill in all of those tags that you need for it to be valid HTML. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't fill that in. So let's go ahead and actually write good HTML. So let's go ahead and do that, because sometimes, if you don't do this, then things aren't going to look right, and it's going to possibly make mistakes when it actually does that. So let's go ahead and actually fill it in. So the head is where you want to put all of your styling and script information. We don't have any of that yet, so we don't have to worry about that, but we do want to put all of this inside the body. So now that we put everything in there and we've styled it, we've indented it correctly and stuff like that, let's try it again. Let's run it one more time. And then if we preview it, it should look exactly the same, but when we open it up, now we should be able to see in our page source. If we right click here and then check out our page source, now you should see all those tags. We should see HTML, the head, body, etc. So that's a lot better HTML. It's a lot better styling and stuff like that. So that is how we create a static HTML page. And what static means is there's no variables here. There's nothing that's ever going to change. The first time you load the page, it's going to look the exact same as the 100th time that you load the page. But that's not how most HTML works, right? Like, imagine if Google just gave you the same result regardless of what you put in. They just hard-coded the exact pages that you're going to see. That's not super great, right? So instead, let's do something else. Let's actually add some things in. Sorry, don't worry about that line yet. So let's actually, instead of hard coding things, let's actually change some stuff around to see if we can do something where we have a dynamic page instead. So let's say we have some number, and we're pulling that number by doing random.randint, and it's just going to give us a number between 1 and 20. So there seems to be an error, and that's because it doesn't know what to do with random. So let's import random here. Sound good to you? Let's see if there's anything else we need here. We're not actually using this right now. So before we use it inside the file, the simple way that we can do this is to just hard code it inside of a string, right? So we can just actually do it the like janky way, which is basically doing something like this. And this should theoretically just print out a number in an h1 tag. So let's try that one more time. And it prints out 13. That's awesome. And now we have a dynamic HTML page because every time we load it, it's going to give us a different number. That's awesome. But that's not super scalable, right? We can't actually just add all of our variables in line in a giant string for the reasons that we talked about before. So instead, let's do something where we pass in whatever variable we want into the HTML. So the way that we're going to do that is, again, we're going to call flask.renderTemplate. And this time we're going to give it multiple arguments. This time, obviously, the first argument still is index.html. But now we want to do something different, where we want to give it a new variable. And we want to give it an HTML variable. So let's say that the variable name here is random number. And we're going to say that that is equal to num. So again, this is going to be the HTML variable equals the Python variable. So this is a variable that it's going to have this name in our HTML file. And then num is whatever our Python variable is. So that should correspond with whatever Python variable we have, which you can see in line 9. So random number equals num means you're setting an HTML variable called random number equal to the value of our Python variable that we've already generated in line 9. And now all we have to do is use it here. So the way that we use it is a very interesting syntax. You want to surround your variable with double curly brackets. And again, we want to use the same variable name that we had here in our HTML. So we're going to do something like this. Hello templates, and then curly braces, random number, and then end your close curly braces. Keep in mind that these spaces don't matter, but they're just here for readability, so I'm going to keep them in there. Spaces out here would matter. So unless you don't want spaces out there, don't leave spaces out there. So let's test that out and see what happens here. Awesome. So now we see 13. When we load it again, we should see a different number. So now we're able to have a dynamic HTML page that uses a value from Python, passes it from the server down to the HTML, and it's rendered on the screen. Now, one thing that you can do that's more helpful than just having one number is you can have multiple different arguments. So let's say that we have a different argument and it's a different type. Let's say it's my birthday, and I'm going to hard code my birthday in here. I was not born like 3 months ago. I was born many decades ago. So let's say that that's my birthday, and that is my birthday. But let's say we have something like this. I'm not actually sure if this will work, giving it the same name. It doesn't like that, actually. So let's try birth date. Let's just do something like that for now. I'm going to copy and paste that over here so that I don't make any mistakes. And instead of hello templates here, I'm just going to do Sresh's birthday is, and then birth date here. Now let's stop this and see what happens here. And boom, we actually see our second variable as well as our first variable. So that 15 we expect to change. We don't expect this variable to change though. And we see 18 changed, but this one didn't. So again, we've been able to convert this static page that always says the same thing into a dynamically loading HTML file now, which will take in the arguments that we pass in, and then display it accordingly and change the display whenever those variables change.